Okay, I want to welcome each and every one of us to training today. Today we want to look at how to assign resources and how to set our baseline. We look at what a baseline is and how to set one up. We look at the types of resources that we have and what differentiates each one from the other. Okay, for us to assign resources, the first thing we need to do is that we need to change the view to a resource sheet. So your view has to be the resource sheet. You click the Gantt chart, then you see resource sheet, then you click it. Now I have some already inputted resource for this particular project, but I'm going to create another one so that we understand how it's been done. Okay, for instance, I have an engineer that I want to add as a resource. Basically, resource can be of three types. We can have a work resource, we can have a material resource, and we can have a cost resource. A material is a work resource can either be personnel or equipment, right? The engineer on site, the supervisor on site, the painter, they are all work resource. And you can also have equipment. They are also termed, they are categorized as a work resource. If there's any equipment that you have and you are going to use it in relation to a particular task, you can assign a work resource to that task. Alright, the third one is the cost resource, which are independent cost elements that are one way or the other associated with a particular activity. Things like transportation costs, some administrative costs and charges can be added under this. So for instance, if I want to create a new resource, all I need to do is type the name of the resource. Alright, for instance, my new resource is Engineer Latif. By default, it's telling me that this is a work resource. If it's a work resource, I use work. Alright. Now, if this is not a work resource, you are not supposed to choose anything here. If you choose anything, it will not answer you. If you type anything, it will not go. But if this is as well a material resource, then here you can input maybe the unit of that resource. Maybe it's a concrete. Maybe for instance, maybe it's let's change another resource. Okay, so let's say for instance is concrete. All right, and this is work. So you can say cubic meter. You can use this one to note the units of measurement of that material. Then initials is giving you C just to connote it. Then you can always group your material if you want to group them. For instance, if this is sand, okay, it can come under concrete as a group. Okay, so the maximum when it comes to a material resource, in terms of percentage availability does not come into place. But when you have a work resource, that's when the availability comes into play, and you can always select the rate. the rates for that particular resource that you have. If you have overtime, you can select it. Then also there are some resource that you give their price on cost per use. Okay, cost per use talks to, for instance, if you use a particular resource once, the resource, the cost, you can add it here. Now this column talks about accrual. What this means is, at what point do you want that cost to be accrued to that tax? Do you want the cost to be accrued to a tax at the beginning? Do you want the cost to be accrued to the tax at the end? Or do you want it to be prorated? Prorated, it means as the progress of work is going on, the cost element is being accrued accordingly. For instance, if you have this resource is to work on an activity for 5 days, and if you have chosen the accrual method to be prorated, if the cost element is, if the cost implication of using that resource, for instance, is 4,000 and is working for 4 days, it means if it has worked for 2 days, you will have accrued 8,000. But if you choose start here, immediately you deploy that resource, it will calculate the total number of duration, and it will apportion the cost accordingly. So it's always advisable to choose prorated accrual method. Alright, so we have the baseline calendar. If you have not changed the calendar, it can be standard, and just leave it there as standard. Okay, so basically if you have attached the necessary information for this cost element, then you are good to go. You can always double click that resource to check for further information about that particular resource. We dialog box we have here is the resource information dialog box. Alright, so if you have done the needful on this sheet, you go back to your Gantt chart. All you just need to do, this is your resource name. If you want to attach a particular resource to a task, all you just need to do is to come to the resource column. You click this drop down. All the resources available, they are displayed here. You just click one of them and it's deployed to this particular task. And if you have your cost column here, the implication of deploying this guy to this place comes into play immediately. Alright, so this is 6 days. That guy is on 4 hours, $4,000 per hour. So it will calculate 4 hours, $4,000 times 8 hours times 6 days. You will have a cost implication of deploying the resource on this column. Alright, so basically that is how. So that is the more important. The reason why you do this is if you are deploying an engineer to a task that the budget, we can add another column. Let's see where we have a column here for budget height. Okay, let's see budget costs. Okay, you do not get anything here because you have not created budgeted costs at the beginning. It is a baseline cost. Okay, then go budgeted cost. Let's see whether we get something there. Height. Budgeted. Okay. If we have not saved as a baseline, or you have not added a budget cost there, you will not be able to get that. All right. So basically, what this tells us is if you have an activity that you have a particular value for that activity, if you are deploying that engineer on that activity, and that is the only thing he's doing for that day, and the cost you have on that engineer, for instance, how much you are paying him per month, you divide it into weeks, you divide it into days, you know the cost implication of that engineer for you per day, and you assign it to a task, and the money on that task is even more than how much you are paying your engineer. Automatically, for that particular task, you are making a loss. So that's the importance of doing things like this, to really know. You know, at times we just walk. We are not. We don't look at. We are not on top of the cost. We are not on top of the parameters that at the end of the day will determine our bottom line. At the end of the day will determine whether we are making profit or loss. So if we can take our time at the beginning of the project to go through these details, of course it's time consuming. Of course we might not have time if it's a small project. But if it's a big project, things like this, they matter, because all these little things are the ones that make up whether at the end of the day you are going to make a loss or a profit. So now we want to look at baseline. What is a baseline, and how do we calculate one? All right, so to go to your baseline, you go to projects, then you see set baseline. So what is a baseline? Basically, a baseline is a snapshot of your schedule that includes information about tasks, resources, and assignments. Alright. So basically what this does is, the ideal thing is when you are planning for a project, you decide the initial schedule. When you get approval for that schedule, you will save it based on the information that you have entered. It's like a snapshot in terms of activities, in terms of duration, in terms of costs where you are. Now, most projects, during the course of the project, things change. There might be additional activities, there might be additional costs. So when you have made changes, you save again. So at the end or intermittently during that project, you might want to compare notes. Okay, so we want to look at how to set a baseline. Like I said, you can compare multiple baselines to see how your project has changed over a period of time. So you can click project set baseline. Then you click set baseline. It brings out an icon, a dialog box, and then based on today's date, that baseline will be set. Now, it is worthy of note to mention that in Microsoft Project, for a particular project, you have the opportunity of setting 11 baselines during the lifespan of a project. You can set a maximum of 11 baselines during the lifespan of a project. It means you can compare notes on different times. You can save your project, you can make a snapshot, as it were, for everything 11 times for a particular project. So you click OK. What you have done is that you have saved that project based on those information that we have there. All right, then you can also let's expand this place. Now when you see this icon, what it shows the progress of work against the planned one. All right, so now if you now need to make changes, you can make changes. For instance, you had snagging. I just want to cleaning. I just want to add some activities to this, which happens most times when a project is going on. So let's look at baseline cost, for instance. Okay, so we have baseline cost. This baseline cost will only be affected. Baseline cost and actual cost are only affected when you update your progress. If an activity has not been started, baseline cost will not come out and actual cost will not come out. But immediately you start it, what does it mean? It means you are deploying resource, and the cost implication of deploying those resources, they will accrue there. So what I just want to bring out there is, if for instance, if there is this let me deploy a resource here. Let's say this engineer is being deployed here. All right, this even though this resource has been deployed for this activity, the baseline cost is not showing because it was never part of what was shot before. The snapshot that was taken before. So you go back to your project, you go back to your baseline, you can clear the baseline or set another one. It will now tell you that this one was last saved at this particular date. You can now click, for instance, baseline 1, you click it. If you click baseline 1 and you deploy that resource and you start the monitoring, you update the percentage, the cost implication will be displayed here. Alright, so that is what baseline is. Baseline is very important, that we always save our project as a baseline, so that when we want to compare notes, you can always run your analysis to check your baseline, how it's going to be. You can see now, I go back to my format, then I click this baseline font. It gives me two different shapes. So the shape down is your baseline being compared to where you are. So you go to your format, you click baseline, it immediately gives you these two shapes, so that you can monitor how you are performing against your baseline. Alright, so that is what baseline is. Baseline is important, so that we can compare notes during the course of our project monitoring and control.